Their mission is simple.
The Taliban and Osama bin Laden picked a fight with us.
By night, by day, across the mountains of Afghanistan,
Be advised, Yankee 35 is en route.
and through its narrow valleys,
You can fly over places that look like the Stone Age.
with a faithful weapon, the Cobra helicopter.
It's a motivator for our troops. You know, when they hear the Cobras coming by.
Keep your eyes open.
Taking risks,
They're squatting down. One of them's got an RPG.
This was the first time that I had been in the Cobra in a firefight with bullets going both ways.
Tonight, on the hunt with Task Force Red Dog.
From ABC News. This is Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
This is a war story and a love story and a recruiting poster all wrapped into one. Everything we told you last week about the brutal, dehumanizing, depressive qualities of war is likely to be washed away this evening in this video sonnet to an attack helicopter and the Marines who fly it. For 6 months, filmmaker Richard Mackenzie and cameraman William Skinner were embedded with the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve Helicopter Squadron. Its official designation is HMLA 773. Its infinitely more colorful radio call sign is Red Dog. Even though it's a reserve unit, most of its members served full-time in the Marines and then enlisted as reserves after they retired. The squadron was activated late last year to serve in Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. The Red Dogs are still there, but what Mackenzie and Skinner are going to show you tonight is the story of their first 6 months at war. This film is a co-production between Nightline and the Discovery Network. On January 10th, Discovery will be launching its new military channel. The Discovery film, Task Force Red Dog, will launch that channel. Here, though, is our take on the story. It's part of what veteran war correspondent Chris Hedges and I were talking about on Nightline last Friday. It's the intoxicating side of war. It's difficult to watch those Super Cobra attack helicopters and the latest version of the Huey helicopter gunships without your pulse beginning to beat just a little faster. Back home in Georgia and Louisiana, they fly for companies such as Delta and Federal Express. But the Marines of Task Force Red Dog have been called to active duty in Afghanistan, and their lives have changed.
I started thinking about the military probably about halfway through college. Flying had been something that I'd always kind of been around. My dad flew a little bit.
Oh, ever since I was little, all I wanted to do was be a pilot. I was active duty for about 11 years, almost to the date. Reason getting out, just when you start hitting this rank, they wanted me to go do a Pentagon tour or go to a group or things like that, and I just want to continue flying.
I turned the TV on, I watched the second airplane hit the towers, and I knew that our world was about to change.
I remember coming home that night and sitting down with my family and knowing, being in the reserves and knowing what was going on, that I sit down with Laura Lynn and the boys and said, okay, things are about to change. There's a possibility that I'm going to get activated and I'm going to have to leave here very soon.
Once a Marine, always a Marine. The Taliban and Osama bin Laden picked a fight with us. And if we just tuck tail and run, we are inviting every other terrorist throughout the world to do the exact same thing that he did and get away with it.
The Cobra is pretty much the loudest helicopter around. That two-bladed sound is unmistakable.
Let's go to the runway. We'll wait for the seal. Roger. Watch the truck coming in. Inside.
I know from the experience of what I have in the Cobra, the 3,000 hours or so that I have flying this airplane, that there's not a piece of ordnance out there that we can't carry, and there's really not a job out there that the Cobra can't do one way, fashion, or form.
It's a motivator for our troops. You know, when they hear the Cobras coming by and they know, okay, we got some fire support.
It's been proven in the Gulf War, and once again in Iraq, and also here in Afghanistan, and same thing in Somalia, is that the aircraft is very versatile. It's easy to deploy.
It's so flexible in the amount of ordnance it can do, the amount of fuel, the altitudes, the temperatures, the conditions in the environment that airplane can fly in.
Be advised, Yankee 35 is en route for a single CH for BCP-3.
Every time I get in it, I have a big smile on my face.
Roger, Yankee. Ice, repeat ice. You've got 2 snakes working targets.
As a Cobra pilot, when you're flying overhead and you are looking for bad people, it is unbelievably difficult for us to decide who's good and who's bad.
Yeah, Roger.
You have thousands of people walking around with weapons, and you have no idea if they're Taliban or if they're just some farmer walking around protecting his crops.
It's about 3 clicks north of Oklahoma.
I would say 80% of the people in this country, just from what I've seen, are carrying some type of weapon.
They're squatting down. One of them's got an RPG in the
I refer to it, if the United States or the average American sees this, you can look back in the wild, wild west that you all read about.
We've heard there may be a PKM out there also. We're getting shaky information from our AMS. Yeah, Roger. They kind of like to ain't us, but stand by.
It's completely legal in this country to walk around with a weapon.
Go down the ridge line where it takes a second dip. There's a big bush.
They look up at you and wave. You suspect that they're good guys. If they don't look at you, I wish we could just land and shake them down.
Copy, we got our eyes on him. Looks like he's got a truck on the backside as well. It's stopping, people talking to him. Stand by, we're gonna take a little pass and see if we can get them to do anything. Roger.
When I first started flying over Afghanistan, I was like really taken aback, because you can fly over places that look like the Stone Age. I mean, they're just mud huts, and they could have been in the 16th century.
These people live back 1,000 years in time. I'm flying over something that's thousands of years old, and they're still doing it the same way by hand, day in and day out. Where do they get their water? How do they grow their food? You know, there's no 7-Eleven down at the end of the corner where they get their gas or buy their bread. And every day you see them as you're flying around. You see people scavenging for wood or walking around the hills and just wondering. Their whole day is just spent in trying to gather things to survive.
Be advised, in about 3 or 4 miles up this wadi, you're going to run into a truck stop. And we got trucks all across the road right now. It's blocked up. We'll let you know whether it's going to get cleared or not.
When we come back, a dramatic rescue that breaks all convention.
And I had one of those cold shots of urine that you get, you know, you're just like, I cannot believe I just got volunteered. That in the Marine Corps had never been done before.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Staples.
Along the alternate route, they're setting up a covert ambush. And so what they're going to do is recon one day, set up the block the next day, ambush the third day.
It all begins with the daily intelligence briefing.
So hopefully they'll be able to basically either shoot a lot of people or deny them the ability to access in and out of Afghanistan.
The only thing that they respect is absolute force, and the military response is pretty much the only thing that we're left with for some of these guys.
You've got 3 of them.
Going through it and killing everybody in the town, tactically, that doesn't make any sense. Do you get the bad guys? Sure. But morally, what you're doing is you're teaching that you no longer care anything about any life or any of the people here.
We're going to be down here in Kaust.
But things don't always go according to plan.
Some special ops guys, a unit that was out, called in via SATCOM, satellite communications, that they were getting shot at, and they were in an ambush, and they were requesting close air support.
once we got overhead, the guys on the ground directed us to an area where they were ambushed. So we started scanning the hills, and I was flying at the time. David was looking out, and he saw 4 suspects with AK-47s.
In the Marines, all assets, including the Red Dog's Cobras, have one salient mission: to support individual troops on the ground.
Basically, I relayed over the radio that the 4 individuals were now egressing the area, and the low passes we were doing weren't going to keep them from going over the ridge line and possibly getting away from the Special Forces. They requested if we knew of any lift assets in the area.
We don't have any lift assets for you. The only thing we could do is maybe throw down the ammo bay door of the aircraft, which is held together by hinges and 2 big, large cables, so it will support the weight.
Come down here and land. Let's do it. Let's do this emergency extraction.
The Special Forces guys wanted for us to lift them and intercept these guys that are getting away from them.
He and I quickly went through some numbers and kind of in our head and tried to figure out exactly, could this happen? I mean, with the amount of weight that we were about to put on the aircraft.
David and I discussed, the possibilities, the ramifications of the tight terrain that we had to land in.
And I had one of those cold shots of urine that you get, you're just like, I cannot believe I just got volunteered to do something that in the Marine Corps had never been done before.
We knew what we needed to do to conduct this thing safely. And so we made a nice, smooth approach into the River Wadi.
We were going down into an area where basically if anybody wanted to take a pop shot at us, we had to depend on somebody else.
Lifting somebody or putting somebody on the ammo bay doors is something is an emergency procedure. We as Cobra pilots are familiar with it, but you wouldn't go out and actually train to it.
I jumped out of the front seat of the Cobra with the straps and grabbed 2 Special Forces guys, opened the ammo bay, and basically put them on the ammo bay. And they were kind of looking at me with big eyes because I don't think they recognized exactly what they had just gotten themselves into until they sat down on this ammo bay, and I took a strap and put it across their waist, and I cinched it down.
David strapped the 2 Special Forces guys, gave them a quick instruction, made sure they were set tight.
I'll get you on the ground very quickly. You're not going anywhere. You're strapped to the aircraft even if the ammo bay breaks.
I had the advantage of being able to look at the Special Forces guys, so if there was going to be any trouble, if they were slipping or for some reason, something wasn't going right, I could immediately communicate that to David.
We flew around, came to the top of a ridge line that was pretty tight, and I came to about a 1-foot hover, and Bullet basically motioned those guys to jump off the aircraft. They jumped off, and we went back and we did this 2 more times. So it was a total of 6 guys that I transported. The special ops guys ended up capturing 5 guys. They found some weapons, and they also found some bloody rags where they had returned fire and found the ambush site where they were originally engaged from.
That made us feel good because we actually did something, and we got some bad guys that day.
It has to be one of the coolest things I ever did. It really does, because I didn't recognize exactly how big the deal was to the special ops guys until the next day. And these guys are based at a different camp. And they came over to the camp that we're at, so they specifically made a decision to come over and find us. And they brought us some goodies to thank us. They brought us a bunch of pictures. And all they could talk about was, you guys basically did whatever it took to get the mission done, which is what it takes over here to get these bad guys. You understand that there are certain rules, and you didn't do anything that the aircraft wasn't capable of doing, but you did do stuff outside the rules to try to make something happen to allow us, again, to get the bad guys so their family and my family and everybody else 2 or 3 generations down the line are still not coming over here.
When we come back, the Cobra pilots engage the enemy.
They actually weren't scared of the helicopters. They fought regardless because their ambush was there and they're going to execute.